The hall was already full long before the event officially began. Soft lights reflected off polished floors, and quiet conversations floated through the air like background music. People arrived with confidence, dressed neatly, carrying themselves as if they belonged there. This was not the kind of place where surprises were expected. Everything followed a plan, and everyone seemed to know their role. She stood near the side of the room, close enough to observe but far enough to stay unnoticed. She was not a guest of honor. She was not there to perform. She was simply helping, doing small tasks, making sure things ran smoothly. Her clothes were clean but modest, blending into the background. Most people did not look at her twice. In the center of the hall sat a grand piano. Its black surface shined under the lights, untouched and waiting. It was meant to be played later by a known performer. Someone whose name appeared on the program, someone people were actually there to hear. For now, the piano was silent, almost forgotten as people talked and laughed. She glanced at it briefly as she passed by, not lingering for long. The piano stirred something familiar inside her, something quiet and personal. She had learned long ago not to show that part of herself in places like this. Talent, she had discovered, did not always invite kindness. Sometimes it only invited judgment. Time passed, and the energy in the room slowly shifted. Guests checked their watches. The organizer whispered urgently into a phone. The scheduled pianist had not arrived yet. At first, no one worried. Delays happened. But as minutes stretched on, the silence around the piano became uncomfortable. Someone suggested turning on recorded music. Another shook their head, saying it would feel cheap. The event was meant to feel refined, professional. A piano track playing from speakers would ruin the mood. They needed something live, even if only for a few minutes. That was when someone noticed her standing nearby. It was not a look of recognition. It was more like convenience. Someone remembered hearing that she knew a little piano. The words were spoken casually, without much thought. Knowing a little piano was not impressive here. It was almost laughable. A few people turned toward her. Their expressions were polite but uncertain. One of them smiled and asked if she could play something simple. Just a short tune. Nothing serious. Just to fill the silence until the real pianist arrived. The way it was said mattered. It was not cruel, but it was small. The request carried no expectation, no respect for skill. It sounded like asking someone to hum a song while waiting. She hesitated. In that pause, she felt the weight of the room. Eyes watched her, not with excitement but with mild curiosity. Some already seemed bored. Others looked away, assuming she would decline. Her mind raced. She knew what stepping toward that piano meant. It meant being seen. It meant being judged by people who did not know her story. People who believed talent always announced itself loudly. She had learned to stay quiet for a reason. But she also felt something else. A pull. Not toward attention, but toward the piano itself. Toward the sound she had carried with her for years. Practiced in private rooms, late nights, borrowed instruments, and moments no one ever witnessed. She nodded slowly. A few people looked surprised, as if they had not expected her to agree. Someone motioned toward the piano. The path felt longer than it really was. Each step echoed in her chest. She could hear whispers behind her. Nothing harsh, just assumptions. Just something easy. This won't take long. It's only temporary. She sat on the bench and adjusted it slightly. The piano felt familiar beneath her fingers, even though this one was finer than any she had owned. The keys were smooth, cool, almost welcoming. She took a breath. The room did not fully quiet down. Some people kept talking softly, confident that nothing important was about to happen. A few sipped their drinks. No one raised a phone to record. She placed her hands on the keys. For a moment, she thought about stopping. About standing up and saying she wasn't comfortable. About returning to the background where she had learned to stay safe. But then she remembered the long hours. The sacrifices. The way music had carried her through moments when nothing else did. She remembered playing when no one listened, when no one cared, when the sound was only for herself. She began to play. The first notes were exactly what they asked for. Simple. Soft, familiar, a tune that felt safe and gentle. It floated through the room without demanding attention. First, nothing changed. People continued their conversations. The organizer relaxed slightly, relieved that the silence had been filled. The piano was doing its job, and that was all anyone expected from it. She kept her eyes on the keys. Her posture was calm, steady. She did not rush. She let the music breathe. Inside, she was listening carefully, not just to the sound but to the room, to the rhythm of voices fading in and out, to the way people reacted without realizing they were reacting. Slowly, she began to feel more at ease. Her fingers moved with quiet confidence, shaped by years of practice no one knew about. She stayed within the boundaries of the simple tune, respecting the request, but there was something else underneath it. Something deeper, waiting. A few people nearby began to notice. One conversation paused. Someone tilted their head slightly. Another person stopped tapping their foot. The music felt different than expected, even though no one could yet explain why. She did not look up. She allowed herself to settle fully into the moment. The piano was no longer just filling silence. It was speaking in a language she knew well, a language that carried emotion without needing words. Still, she kept it controlled, gentle, measured. This was only the beginning, and no one in that room understood yet that something unexpected had just started. The tune continued, soft and steady, like a calm breath in a busy room. At first, it was still treated as background sound. People nodded slightly without realizing why. A few smiles appeared, not because they were impressed, but because the music felt pleasant. She stayed focused on the keys. Her face showed no effort, no need to prove anything. She played the way she always had, with patience. Each note landed where it belonged. Each pause had meaning. Gradually, the room began to change. One conversation faded out completely. Someone forgot what they were about to say. Another person lowered their glass slowly, eyes drifting toward the piano without conscious choice. The music was still simple, but it carried a feeling that did not match the low expectations set moments earlier. She sensed it before she saw it. Years of playing had taught her how people responded, even when they tried to hide it. She could feel the attention shifting, like air moving before a storm. Her fingers moved with quiet confidence. The melody remained familiar, but she added small touches, almost invisible changes that gave the tune more depth. A softer press here, a longer hold there. Nothing dramatic, nothing flashy, yet something was happening. A man standing near the back leaned forward slightly. A woman near the front stopped checking her phone. The organizer, who had been pacing nervously, slowed down and turned around. The piano no longer sounded like filler. She kept her eyes down, not wanting to break the moment. Looking up too soon might remind everyone of who they thought she was. Instead, she let the music speak. Inside her chest, her heart beat faster, but her hands remained steady. She was careful not to rush. Rushing would betray emotion. Calm would invite trust. Someone whispered, but this time the whisper carried surprise, not doubt. How is she doing that? Another voice replied softly, I don't know. She heard none of it clearly, but she felt the energy shift. The room was listening now. She allowed the melody to stretch slightly, guiding it into a smoother flow. The tune still felt simple on the surface, but it carried emotion beneath it. It felt like a quiet story unfolding, one that didn't need words. She thought about all the times she had been overlooked, all the rooms she had stayed silent in, all the moments she chose not to raise her hand, not to step forward, because she believed it was safer to remain unseen. The piano carried those memories without exposing them. The sound grew warmer, fuller, filling the space without becoming loud. The piano's voice wrapped around the room, touching corners it had not reached before. People began turning their chairs. Someone who had been standing crossed the room to get a closer look. Not to judge, but to understand. Curiosity replaced indifference. She noticed movement in her peripheral vision but did not let it distract her. Her focus stayed locked on the rhythm. The steady rise and fall of the notes grounded her. She reminded herself to breathe, The tune reached a gentle pause, a moment where she could have ended. That had been the original request. Just a simple tune. Just a short moment. She hovered there, fingers resting lightly on the keys. In that brief silence, the room held its breath. No one asked her to stop. No one spoke. The organizer opened their mouth, then closed it again. She felt something rare. Permission. Not spoken but felt. So she continued. The melody returned, but this time it carried more emotion. Not louder, not faster, just deeper. It felt like the music was finally allowed to be honest. The piano responded beautifully, each note clear and strong. She leaned into the sound, letting it guide her instead of controlling it. Now almost everyone was watching. Faces showed confusion, curiosity, and growing respect. This was no longer someone filling time. This was someone who understood the instrument. Phones slowly appeared, lifted without rush. Not to record a mistake, but to capture something unexpected. She still did not look up. Her posture remained calm, but inside, emotion stirred. Not pride, not excitement, something deeper. Relief. For the first time in a long while, she felt allowed to be herself. The music carried her forward. Each transition felt natural, like steps along a path she had walked many times before. The tune had grown into something more, something personal. The room was silent now. Even the soft clinking of glasses had stopped. The air felt thick with attention. She knew she was crossing a line. Not a rule, but an expectation. She was no longer playing simple. She was playing true. Yet no one stopped her. The organizer stood frozen, eyes fixed on the piano. Others exchanged looks that said the same thing without words. They had misjudged her. She felt it not as victory, but as clarity. This moment was not about proving them wrong. It was about honoring the years she had spent preparing for a moment like this, even when she believed it might never come. Her hands moved freely now, confident but controlled. She stayed grounded, resisting the urge to impress. The music didn't need that. It only needed honesty. As the tune built toward something new, something fuller, she sensed that the room was no longer just listening. They were ready, and she was no longer just filling silence. She was leading the moment. By now, the room no longer felt like the same place it had been earlier. The noise, the casual laughter, the feeling that music was only decoration, all of it had quietly disappeared. What remained was attention, heavy and focused, resting fully on the piano. She felt it without looking up. The silence had a different weight now. It was not empty. It was full of expectation. Her hands continued to move, steady and sure. The melody grew richer, shaped by gentle changes that felt natural, as if the music itself was deciding where to go next. She was no longer thinking about the people watching her. She was thinking about the sound, the feeling, the story hidden inside the notes. The simple tune had transformed. It still carried the shape of where it began, but now it had depth. It rose and fell like a quiet conversation, sometimes soft and reflective, sometimes warm and strong. Each note felt intentional, honest. She remembered learning to play like this, long before anyone ever asked her to perform. She remembered practicing on worn keys, adjusting her touch to broken pedals, playing softly so she would not disturb others. Music had been her private space, a place where she felt understood without needing to explain herself. Now that private world filled the room. Someone near the front shifted in their seat, eyes fixed on her hands. Another person gently motioned for someone else to stop moving. Even those who had arrived late stood still, sensing that something important was happening. She allowed herself to lean slightly into the piano, feeling the vibration travel through her fingers and arms. The instrument responded with warmth, as if it recognized her care. The sound spread evenly, touching everyone in the room. She noticed a few faces soften. Not impressed faces, moved faces. That difference mattered. Her breathing stayed calm, matching the rhythm of the music. She did not rush the quiet parts. She let them exist, letting the silence between notes speak just as clearly as the sound itself. The organizer finally lowered their phone, no longer worried about schedules or delays. The program, the plans, the polished image of the event all felt unimportant now. This moment had taken control. She guided the melody into a gentle rise, letting it grow stronger without becoming loud. The sound filled the space confidently, not asking permission anymore. A few people exchanged glances that said more than words could. This was no longer unexpected talent. This was skill shaped by time. She still did not look up. Not because she was afraid, but because she did not need to. The connection was already there. As the music continued, something else happened. The room began to feel smaller, more intimate. Strangers shared the same focus, the same quiet emotion. Differences faded. Status faded. For a brief time, everyone was simply listening. She felt a tightness in her chest, not from fear, but from emotion rising unexpectedly. She adjusted her touch, keeping control, letting feeling guide without overwhelming the music. This was where many performers pushed too hard. She did not. She trusted the simplicity. She trusted restraint. The melody reached a point where it could have ended again. Another natural pause appeared, clean and complete. She let it hover for a breath. Still, no one spoke. No one moved. She continued. Now the music carried confidence. Not pride, but certainty. The kind that comes from knowing exactly who you are, even if no one else has noticed yet. Her fingers moved across the keys with ease, not showing off, not hiding either. Each note landed with purpose. The piano sang clearly, warmly, filling the hall with sound that felt alive. More phones were raised now, but quietly, respectfully. No flashes, no distractions, just the need to remember this moment. She sensed it then. This was no longer background. This was the center of the event. She allowed the melody to open up, adding layers that revealed her understanding of the instrument. The transitions felt smooth, thoughtful, never rushed. The music felt like it was breathing. People who had doubted her earlier now leaned forward, fully present. Their expressions had changed. Not shocked anymore, something closer to admiration, mixed with disbelief. She wondered briefly how many times talent like this had gone unnoticed, simply because it did not arrive wrapped in confidence or loud promises. The thought passed as quickly as it came. She stayed with the music. The piano responded beautifully, each note clear and balanced. She adjusted naturally, listening closely, guiding the sound as if in conversation. The room felt suspended in time. Even she forgot where she was for a moment. There was only the piano, the sound, and the quiet understanding between them. When she finally lifted her eyes slightly, just for a second, she saw something she did not expect. Respect. Not curiosity. Not surprise. Respect. She returned her gaze to the keys, grounding herself again. The music softened, then rose once more, building toward something fuller, something complete. The energy in the room followed her lead. People breathed with the rhythm. Shoulders relaxed. Faces softened further. She realized that the moment she had avoided for so long had arrived naturally, without force. She had not asked to be seen. She had simply played. As the melody moved closer to its peak, she felt steady, centered, fully present. There was no fear left, no second-guessing, only honesty. The piano filled the hall, not overpowering, but commanding. The sound carried confidence shaped by years of quiet dedication. And everyone in that room now understood one simple truth. She was no longer the person asked to play something simple. She was the one setting the tone. And the stage, without announcement or permission, now belonged to her. The music now carried a strength that could not be ignored. It flowed through the hall with confidence, not loud or forceful, but steady and sure. Every note landed with purpose, and every pause felt meaningful. The piano no longer felt like part of the room, felt like the heart of it. She sat tall, her shoulders relaxed, her movements calm. There was no rush in her hands, no tension in her posture. It looked as though she had always belonged there, even though moments earlier no one expected her to touch the keys. The audience was fully captured. People who had once stood casually now stood still. Those seated leaned forward, eyes locked on the piano. No one checked their phone anymore unless they were quietly recording. Even then, their movements were careful, as if afraid to disturb the moment. She felt the connection clearly now. It moved both ways. The piano spoke, the room listened, and she guided the conversation. She allowed the melody to grow wider, fuller. The tune expanded, weaving gentle complexity into its simple beginning. The sound filled the space evenly, touching every corner without overwhelming it. Her mind was calm. This calm did not come from confidence given by others. It came from years of learning to trust herself when no one else did. From practicing when there was no applause waiting at the end. From loving the music even when it brought nothing in return. That quiet dedication now showed in every movement. The organizer stepped closer to the side of the stage, no longer concerned about timing or plans. The schedule had lost all meaning. This performance had become the event. She sensed the shift without looking up. The air felt different, warmer, charged with emotion. The room was no longer judging. It was receiving. She guided the music into a strong, flowing section. Not dramatic but assured. The piano responded beautifully, its sound rich and clear. Each note felt alive, shaped by care and understanding. A few people nodded slowly, not in approval but in recognition. They recognized skill. They recognized truth. She leaned slightly forward as the melody climbed, then softened again, letting it fall gently. The balance was perfect. Nothing was forced. Nothing was held back. For a moment, she forgot about the audience entirely. There was only her and the piano. She remembered sitting alone years ago, playing quietly in places where no one clapped, no one watched. She remembered wondering if it mattered, if music still mattered when it stayed unseen. This moment answered that question. The piano carried emotion without words. It spoke of patience, of restraint, of strength built slowly over time. People felt it even if they could not explain it. A few eyes in the room glistened, not from sadness but from being unexpectedly moved. She felt it too, rising in her chest. She controlled it carefully, allowing it to shape the sound without breaking it. Emotion gave the music life, but control gave it power. The melody grew confident, stepping fully into its space. The tune that once filled silence now commanded attention. It no longer asked permission to exist. She had taken over the stage without standing, without speaking, without announcing herself. It happened naturally. People who had doubted her earlier now watched with quiet respect. Their earlier assumptions felt distant, almost unreal. This version of her felt undeniable. She felt grounded, centered, steady. Every note reminded her that she was prepared for this, even if she never expected it to happen this way. The music moved toward its strongest point, not loud, not fast, but full. The sound wrapped around the room, holding everyone in the same shared moment. No one moved. No one spoke. The piano carried the weight of the entire hall. She allowed herself one brief glance upward. What she saw confirmed what she already felt. They were with her. Every person in that room was present. Not distracted. Not skeptical. Fully engaged. She returned her eyes to the keys and guided the melody gently downward, preparing for what would come next. The music softened, breathing out slowly, like a calm after a long, steady rise. The quiet that followed each note felt just as powerful as the sound itself. She slowed her movements slightly, allowing the moment to stretch. The piano whispered now, delicate and controlled. The audience leaned in without realizing it. This was no longer about skill alone. It was about trust. She trusted the music. The audience trusted her. The final section of the piece approached not as an ending, but as a completion. The journey felt whole. Her hands moved with ease, guided by instinct more than thought. Every year of quiet practice showed itself in the simplicity of her control. The last notes approached gentle and deliberate. She allowed them to ring, letting the sound fade naturally into the air. She lifted her hands slowly from the keys. The silence that followed was deep, not empty, full. For a heartbeat, no one reacted. Then someone stood. Then another. Applause filled the hall, rising quickly, honestly, without hesitation. It was not polite applause. It was real. She remained seated, hands resting quietly in her lap. Her expression stayed calm, but inside, emotion moved freely. She had not planned this. She had not asked for it. She had simply played. And in doing so, she had taken over the entire stage. The applause continued, strong and steady, filling the hall in waves. It did not rush to end. It stayed, honest and warm, as if people needed time to release what they had just felt. Some clapped with smiles, others with quiet disbelief. A few wiped their eyes without fully understanding why. She remained seated for a moment, letting the sound wash over her. Her hands rested calmly in her lap. She did not bow right away, not because she felt above it, but because she needed a second to breathe. When she finally stood, the applause grew louder. She gave a small, respectful nod. No big gestures, no dramatic smiles, just gratitude. The room slowly settled, but the energy did not disappear. It stayed, alive and bright, like something important had just been shared. People began moving again, but differently than before. Conversations restarted, yet they all seemed to circle back to the same thing. The piano, the moment, her. Several people approached the stage area, careful not to crowd her. Their expressions were open now, curious, respectful. "That was incredible," someone said quietly, as if afraid to break the feeling. Another asked where she had learned to play. She answered simply. No long explanations. No need to prove anything. The music had already done that. The organizer stepped forward, looking almost embarrassed. "I had no idea," they admitted honestly. She nodded, accepting the words without resentment. She understood how easy it was to overlook someone who did not demand attention. The delayed pianist finally arrived, standing near the entrance, unsure of how to step into the room after what had just happened. There was no tension, no rivalry, just an unspoken understanding that something unexpected had taken place. The program for the evening quietly changed. She was asked, gently and respectfully, if she would play again later. This time, it was not a request to fill silence. It was an invitation. She agreed. As the evening continued, people treated her differently. Not with praise that felt heavy or uncomfortable, but with genuine interest. They wanted to know her story, where she came from, how long she had been playing. She shared pieces of it carefully. Not everything. Some parts still belonged only to her. What mattered most was not the recognition itself, but what it represented. She had been seen, not for how she looked, not for where she stood in the room, but for what she carried inside. Later that night, when she returned to the piano, the room was ready. The audience was quiet before she even touched the keys. The respect was already there. She played again, freely this time, without holding back or holding on. The music flowed easily, unburdened by doubt. And again, the room listened. When the event finally ended, people lingered longer than planned. No one seemed in a hurry to leave. They spoke softly, thoughtfully, as if carrying something fragile with them. She packed up quietly, just as she had arrived. There were no flashing lights, no grand exits, just a calm sense of completion. As she stepped outside, the night air felt cool and grounding. The noise of the city hummed gently around her. She paused for a moment, looking up at the sky. For years, she had wondered if moments like this were meant for people like her. People who worked quietly, who waited patiently, who loved something deeply without knowing if it would ever love them back. Tonight had answered that question. Opportunity did not arrive with loud promises or perfect timing. Sometimes it arrived disguised as a simple request. Just play something easy. In the days that followed, messages came. Invitations. Conversations that once felt unreachable now felt possible. Not all of them turned into something lasting, but they did not need to. What mattered was the shift. She walked differently now. Not louder, not prouder, clearer. She understood her place did not depend on permission. She had earned it through patience, honesty, and quiet dedication. The memory of that night stayed with her, not as a highlight to chase, but as a reminder. A reminder that preparation mattered. That silence did not mean absence. That talent did not need an announcement to be real. She returned to her daily life with the same calm she always carried. The same routines. The same private moments with music. But something inside her had settled. She no longer questioned whether her voice deserved space. She knew it did. And somewhere, in a room much like that hall, another piano waited. Another unexpected moment waited. This time, she would not doubt herself. Because she knew now. A simple tune can change everything. When the right person finally plays it.